Hello, welcome. Hello, MACC members. I'm Laurel Hansen, MACC's Program and Engagement Manager. And welcome to Ask MACC Workforce Edition, brought to you by the Metropolitan Alliance of Connected Communities and our Human Resources team. We know our network is faced with ongoing and incredible challenges when it comes to workforce. It's how we provide valuable services to the community. Our workforce challenges can create difficult hurdles for our organizations to operate sustainably. There can be complex and seemingly insurmountable barriers, but luckily, we have an incredible HR expertise at MACC. And as a part of our network, you have access to that HR expertise through our convenings and working with so many of you in the MACC network. During this brief conversation, I'm joined by Katie Berg, HR generalist at MACC. Katie brings her expertise to MACC and our members to provide the HR guidance they need to be successful. Thanks for joining me, Katie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
That's great. Well, so today we're going to talk about culture and really the challenge of remaining competitive amidst shifts in the post-pandemic workforce expectations. So yeah, it's tough out there for a human service nonprofit organization. Our members are busy serving the community while trying to keep workforce positions filled. So let's talk about those challenges and approaches to deal with them. Katie, what do you think are the most important things to consider about a post-pandemic workforce culture? What's changed in the status quo?
A big thing that has changed is employees are more aware than ever that they have options, and nonprofits have to do more to remain competitive with the for-profit workforce. It used to be that nonprofits, we all have these great missions, and people were willing to work for us to make less money, but for a good cause. Nowadays, all companies have good mission statements that speak to people. Plus, the for-profit companies have additional initiatives that make employees proud to work there because they're doing extra things on the side, charitable foundations or, extra things that a nonprofit does. And people feel just fine about working there. And bottom line, it supports the kind of lifestyle that they want. The younger generations are also really prioritizing a true work-life balance and these livable wages. So I think nonprofits need to consider some of the formerly thought of as generous benefits as status quo, and then may need to consider more cutting-edge offerings to stay competitive. So the benefits that I think of as status quo nowadays are good and affordable health insurance, generous paid time off policies, and a remote or hybrid work schedule. And then the benefits that I think of as cutting edge are fully paid and expanded parental leave, unlimited PTO plans, and 4-day work weeks. And there's many more things that one can consider in terms of a benefits package that we could talk about for quite a while.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, things really are shifting. That's interesting. It's interesting to hear about what you're observing. And it goes from, when we're talking about workforce culture, it goes from the whole team, and then we start to look at managers in particular and how complex today's environment is for managers to lead in. And sometimes the future seems uncertain, and leaders as well may not be able to default to what I would think of as predictable workplace management models. How can leaders step into changing workforce expectations themselves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the future is uncertain in many ways. I mean, just look at how much the pandemic changed the landscape of work as we know it. One central thing that's not predicted to change anytime soon is the labor shortage. I remember when we first started talking about this squeeze in the labor market about 10 years ago, that maybe a little less than that. And then the prediction was that things weren't going to let up for about 10 to 15 years. Well, now I feel like we can say it's just not going to go away. We have more people retiring than entering the workforce. We have more open jobs than there are people looking for jobs. And so we just have to figure out how to do work with less people. And so what's going to stand out is workplace cultures. Aside from the basics of wages and benefits, we need competent managers and leadership teams that actively seek input from their employees and act on the information that they receive. Stay interviews are something that continue to be a hot topic. In an exit interview, the person's already decided to leave, and people leave jobs for a variety of reasons, usually some of which a company has control over, and some reasons that a company doesn't have control over. So, for example, someone wants more money or a new challenge. We could have made an impact there. But they also want a shorter commute, or they were just plain burnt out on your industry, and we can't change those things. Whatever the reasons are, what we learn in an exit interview, we're too late. So a stay interview is conducted with current employees, usually between a manager and their direct report. And you get to ask different kinds of questions about what is keeping someone at the company, what they're enjoying, what they're looking forward to. It takes time, effort, and work to conduct stay interviews, but compared to the cost of turnover, you're definitely saving, and you're making a big impact on culture. You're really making sure people feel heard and understood, and then the manager has the opportunity to act on those things.
Yes.
To see what's working well, or help the person implement their goals or the things that they're looking for more of.
Yeah, that sounds like excellent advice, and it sounds attainable, right? It sounds doable. It sounds like with some planning and with some willingness to invest in that, it seems like a really important opportunity to consider. So let's shift to talk a little bit about what we have historically thought of as the purpose-driven workforce. And we know that our leaders want to nurture that purpose-driven workforce. What do you think creates purpose-driven work in today's environment? How can that be supported?
I think it's easy and tempting to lean on one's mission statement, but everybody has a good mission statement. Nobody's mission statement is we do okay work most of the time. So we all do purpose-driven work, but if employees don't feel supported and respected, then it's a breeding ground for resentment and unsustainable turnover. And those effects are going to bleed over into the people that you serve as well. So the good work that our members do is almost the easy part. Folks know and remember what drew them to an organization in the first place. What's really important is that managers have their thumb on the pulse at all times, making sure that their employees have the tools that they need to do their work well, and that those highly competent managers tend to their talent and create an environment that makes people want to stay and refer others to their organization, because your employees are your absolute best advertisements for bringing new people in.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I hear you. Yes, our employees are definitely our greatest recruiting tool. I see that. So we think of a competitive work environment as being money driven. Competition often means money. Our organizations can sometimes feel like they're between a rock and a hard place when it comes to being financially competitive. What process do you think organizations should use to assess their ability to compete in the marketplace? What else should they consider above and beyond financial competitiveness?
So really quickly, before I get to answering your question, I do want to state that competitive workforces are money driven at the very base. So we often talk about above and beyond financial competitiveness because we're assuming that we're doing everything we can. And I just really want to encourage nonprofits to get rid of the scarcity mindset. Nonprofit is just a tax status, not a business model. And if you can't pay people to work for you, then they have to go elsewhere. Now, we know it's not the only thing. People can go match their salary or get a higher salary, but there are lots of other things that matter that are also within our control, right? So people want to come to work. They want to sustain the kind of lifestyle that they want. Mm-hmm. They want to not be depressed. They want to work with good people, not, have people around them that are sucking the life out of them or something like that. Mm-hmm. And they want to feel like they're doing a good job. So everything supports that, but I just don't like to glaze over the fact that compensation is really, really important. And if companies can't afford to pay people more, then it is time to get creative. So let's get to considering above and beyond financial competitiveness. You can do things for your employees that won't cost you more money. You can offer them more paid time off because you'd be paying them anyway. You can create more paid holidays, floating holidays, or you can implement some kind of shortened schedule. Maybe it's just for the summers. On Fridays, you're doing half days. I mentioned this briefly before, but I think a 4-day work week is a place where a nonprofit could truly gain a very competitive edge. Keep people's wages the same, but test a 32-hour work week. I don't want to see a 40-hour work week switched into 4 days. That's not much better for most people. And we do have some data that supports productivity stays the same. And just because you test it out doesn't mean you have to do it forever. You could do a test run before implementing something more permanent. MACC HR can help members strategize about pay, benefits, and offerings, but really look at what you could try to truly gain a competitive edge over other nonprofits and the for-profit workforce. And then I think the other really important space to consider beyond financial competitiveness, something I've mentioned a few times now, but really highly competent managers. People are often promoted because they're good at their job, but being a manager of people is a different skill set, and it's really difficult to learn, and it shouldn't be underestimated or taken lightly. So not only investing in your managers to be a good manager of people, but making sure that they have the time to be a good manager.
Yes. Yeah.
Because all of our managers are continuing to do a workload that we're doing as well, and then expected to do this really careful, important work on top of that. And it does take time.
Absolutely. I hear what you're saying. And I really like what you're saying about it being, money is critical, and there are other opportunities to consider as well. You've shared a lot of creative ideas. So it's not an and, it is an and, it's not an or. There are options. And I do think pay equity is so important, as well as some of those other creative workplace options that you talked about. I appreciate your sharing those. Are organizations reevaluating hiring practices? So as we're talking about the shortages that organizations are challenged by in their workforce, what are you seeing as you work with MACC members?
Definitely. Organizations are having to reevaluate their hiring practices. They've been having to reevaluate their minimum job requirements for a few years, and it's been about time, right? So the default used to be a bachelor's degree, a 4-year degree is minimum. And instead, we're asking ourselves, what does someone really need to have experience in order to do this job? Or what skills can we teach on the job to get folks where they need to be? And we continue to see difficulty in hiring, some roles being more difficult than others. Development directing for organization comes to mind as especially challenging. Any role that has had historically lower wages or undesirable schedules, they continue to struggle. So we've seen a variety of responses from our members, either reevaluating that budget to scrounge up a higher wage. Maybe they are paying to advertise their roles online instead of only taking advantage of free sources. Or sometimes we're just seeing jobs remain open for a really long time before they're filled.
Yeah, that's very interesting. We know that our members are challenged by a lot of workforce situations, but sometimes it's nice to hear an example of what people are trying. And sometimes organizations try things and they work, and sometimes it takes a while, and it just leads to other options and other changes. And I think that's interesting. And I thought maybe you could share an example of a MACC member that we've worked with who has taken that step into changing some of their workforce models, especially since the pandemic. What are they shifting? What are they trying? Have they seen outcomes? Those stories are interesting. Can you share any with us?
Sure, yeah. So, everybody had to shift somewhat during the pandemic, which allowed us to experiment with remote work. And most members who directly serve the community have seen a full or partial return to the office, but many continue to offer flexible work arrangements to their employees. African American Leadership Forum comes to mind as an organization that has made strategic changes to attract top talent. So they have very competitive wages. They proactively network and place a high value on networking, which I really think is priceless. And you can't place enough importance on networking, which has been really hard during the pandemic when we're not sharing space with other people. But African American Leadership Forum is doing that so much so that they are a well-known up-and-comer in the community, and people really want to work for them.
Wow.
They continue to strategize their benefits package. So seeking feedback from their employees and making changes based on that feedback. They are testing unlimited paid time off right now. They have had a summer schedule for a couple of years, which gives employees half of the day off on Fridays during the summer months. They've got a cutting edge health insurance offering that gives employees many carriers and offerings to choose from that are going to, suit their unique needs. And like I mentioned before, surveying their workforce to find out what is the most value to them so they can make sure that their offerings match up. So they made these changes to retain their really highly talented workforce. And due to their efforts, not only have they retained their employees, but their job openings receive many highly qualified applicants, which isn't something most companies are experiencing these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so helpful to hear real life examples. And we know every organization is different, but it's nice to see some examples of what organizations are trying and considering. And sometimes the first step is to just to try making some changes and to consider what could work for their particular workforce. Really appreciate your sharing all of this. Thanks, Katie. Well, that's all the time we have now for this discussion. It's been really interesting, and I appreciate your time and insights, Katie. Thanks for being with me today. I look forward to future conversations with you and our HR team. So MACC members, you're encouraged to visit the MACC website and our Ask MACC page of additional workforce resources. You'll find a variety of information and links to helpful content, including more in this series of recorded HR interviews. So keep in touch. We're here to support you and our network of MACC members. Thank you. Have a great day and be well. Goodbye.